So, what I'd like to do with this video is help you develop the type of writing I'm looking for in these papers. And I'm using my notes from my discussion on Aristotle's Politics as an example to show you how it's done. Now, as you'll notice here, I state this sentence. Here, I hope to develop the argument that Aristotle's distinction between master and slave types will run afoul of his assessment of true forms of government. This is my thesis, right? And so I make the argument. Here's one premise, and as I state, here's some discussion. Here's the second premise, and then right here is the conclusion. The conclusion is my thesis. I state it in a slightly different way. It's a paraphrase, right? When I say that, his distinction will run afoul of his assessment of true forms of government, what I'm saying is that it will let injustice in because he thinks only the true forms of government distribute justice. So that's the idea I want to argue for. So what I did was I went ahead and used a modus ponens type argument. If you remember, modus ponens looks like this. Basically, if something, then something else. Next premise is that something. Therefore, you can conclude the consequent of that something else. We could have said easily, if A, then B, A, therefore B. Or if P, then Q, P, therefore Q. Now, when I'm making an argument and I want to put it in writing, I would do this. I would lay out what I call a bare bones argument structure. And like I said, the argument structure I want to use is modus ponens. So usually the first step I make, and this is what I did when I developed this argument, I went ahead, and did this first. Oh, I don't know why. Oh yeah, let's fix this. I made the right. So there's my if P, which is all this. This is what my P or whatever I want to use, and my if whatever, then whatever else. Right. So here is my antecedent. This is the claim within the conditional, so that's my antecedent. This is my consequent. So what this is ultimately saying, grammatically I just say his because I'm talking about Aristotle, but this is its own sentence that by itself, if it were by itself and not in the conditional, would state Aristotle's conceptions about true forms of government are unjust. Right? So if I want to do modus ponens, then all I have to do is assert by itself in another premise whatever is in the antecedent position. And if we look at my notes, that's ultimately what I do. I copy it, put it in here. It's going to come out all huge, so I'll adjust it because I have a slightly different font for my notes because I have terrible vision. Excuse me. Right? So, just like a puzzle, you have a conditional, and you have the antecedent and the consequent, and you kind of like fill in, punch in the antecedent all by itself as its own distinct sentence, because this is one compound sentence, one complex sentence. So that means I can then conclude the consequent, which is the thesis I want to argue for. So go ahead and put it there. And I went ahead and took some liberty in rephrasing my thesis for, dramatic effect. But the point remains, this is what we do. Now, whenever you're trying to write an argument, think about what you want to argue for, which is your thesis, and then see if you can fit it into some argument structure. Now, whenever you write these one-page papers, this will not do. Just doing a bare bone structure and like this with all the P's and with all the P1, P2 and all that, that's not what I want. I just do this to show you as kind of a way of getting the basic argument down that you want to make. This is the main argument, but in all reality, the actual argument would look something like this. So I'm going to put this up. I'll open another document. And I'll pull up my notes again. And the argument would look something like this. And suddenly you have, and like I said, you can use this type of wording, but you can always word things in your own way if you so desire. Right? So, I'd post that there. Right now there's all this stuff from the formatting. And if I wanted to, I could change this to in this paper. And then literally after I've developed all the premises with discussion of each premise and stuff, I just go ahead and stick them in there. And there is your one-page paper, you'll see. Right. Oops. Now, another thing we can do, it seems kind of redundant, but you say, here is my argument. You can say that, and that is perfectly fine. That is what you should do. Now, if you noticed, I have this, and I can go ahead and include my discussion, but to let my reader know what my premise is, I'll just say first, right? And there it is. There's my premise. And then I'll add the discussion so that there is no confusion. And because it's all formatted, I have to do away with the formatting. See? Now we have all this discussion here. And then I can put secondly and go back to my next premise. Because here, in the first premise, we're only talking about it on a condition, right? First, if Aristotle maintains his master-slave distinction as true, then his conceptions about true forms of government are unjust. So this whole statement, it's all conditional. But in order for conditions to become realized, you have to assert them explicitly. So that's what we do here. Copy that. And then enter it. Does in fact maintain the truth of his master-slave distinction. And I can include some more, the second part of the discussion. So I'll copy that. This will turn out to be a longer paper, obviously, than one page. And again, all the formatting stuff will go crazy. So back it up. There we go. So I've included all that discussion. And now I can enter my conclusion. Copy that. Paste it. And if you notice, my notes have some discussion of the conclusion as well. And this is very important, especially in larger papers. because it helps really flesh out an argument, really hammers home the point to the reader, what you're trying to say. Now, let me copy all of this, shorten, make this font smaller, and let's also make it 1.5 spaced. And I think my borders are all the same, right? So check my layout, margins. Let's do custom. If my computer would only work, there we go. So I got 0.9, 0.9. You know, I'll shrink it down a little bit on my side margins as well. So as much as it can fit. Let's view the header. Let's go back home. View the header, right? And this is basically how I want your papers to look. If you're in my one class, be $33.99. If you're in my one class at Northern New Mexico College, just pretending this is homework 4, which it might be, or if you're a student at City College of San Francisco, then you would put Phil 2. And this is literally all I want. In these papers. This one is of course a lot longer because I'm very wordy. And I just caught myself with a little misspelling here. That's great. And that's what you do. But if you notice, everything remains. This is what a modus ponens argument looks like, fleshed out, completely fleshed out, which is why I called the other version a bare bones argument. Which is why this is, see, now you can just see the bare bones argument, the whole thing that they're trying to state. But with the fleshed out argument, you don't see it as clearly. And that's why we rely on things like premise indicators and follow them up immediately with the premise. Right? See, I'm looking around. Oh, second premise. See, you don't just throw out the words firstly, secondly, therefore, willy-nilly. They really do indicate what you are trying to say, exactly what you're trying to say. And, of course, this should be a question. I don't know why I put it. But see, that's how it works for these short papers. I could have probably edited out some of the discussion of each premise and the conclusion to bring it down to one paper. And that's where you get creative. You have to decide which words need to stay to get your point across. But this is exactly what you should do in these papers. I hope this helps. Thank you very much.